Everybody, happy Friday. This is State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and you are here with us for yet another live stream with Mallory. We are trying to figure out a fun name for this because, especially at 1 p.m. on a Friday, it's not necessarily a coffee hour. It's not always an hour. So if you have any recommendations, let us know. So for those just joining us, I am State Senator Mallory McMorrow. We do these live streams every single week that the Senate is in session, and we try to do them even during the off periods when we're in our in-district work period. So if you are joining us for the very first time, welcome. If you are joining us again, welcome back. And quick housekeeping reminder on how this works. We are live streaming this across multiple platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We are looking into how to add LinkedIn and Instagram. So trying to get this on all the platforms to make sure we are where people are. So regardless of what platform you are watching from, we do this as a really casual, as you can see by my casual Friday attire here, casual way to get an update from me for you on what's happening in the state, what is happening in the legislature, and then we share good news from all throughout our district, and then we open it up for live Q&A. So if you do have a question, I will bring on Liz later on to moderate Q&A. But the way this works is type your question into the comment section, and no matter what platform you're on, it will funnel those questions to us. But what we do ask is that you include your name, if that is not immediately obvious by your username, what city you are from representing. If you're out of town, you don't have to be in Birmingham, but if you live in Birmingham, let us know, and then fire away with your question, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. All right. So first up, news for this week. COVID-19 booster shots are now available. So in line with CDC and FDA approval and guidance, a third booster shot was authorized for those who received the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for recommended groups of people. So anybody who is 65 or older, anybody who is particularly vulnerable or has some health concerns, and then finally anybody who works in kind of vulnerable high-risk industries. So like healthcare workers, teachers, I know there's another list. So if you are interested in getting a booster shot, I stopped by Walgreens here in town yesterday and saw a lot of people getting their booster shots, which was great to see. So you can get those at any major pharmacy, and Oakland County is also offering those booster shots. Appointments are highly encouraged, but not required. And you can find more information at oaklandcountyvaccine.com. Get all the information on the vaccine, any questions, and then it's oaklandcountyvaccine.com/appointments if you want to go ahead and make an appointment. All right. Next up, I'm going to be sharing my screen for some exciting news from the district. And we are trying out something new with audio visual. So bear with us and we will see if this will work. All right. Exciting news over the past week. FLOTUS, Dr. Jill Biden, came to visit us here in Royal Oak. And I'm going to go ahead and play a clip of that for you.
First Lady Jill Biden making a stop here in Metro Detroit, working to put education in the spotlight. Today's visit is all part of her return to school road trip.
Paula Tutland is following the First Lady's visit tonight. And Paula, since she is an educator herself, this obviously is a high priority for her.
Yeah, it really is. And in fact, Oakland Community College was just one of a handful of stops First Lady Dr. Jill Biden made. Apparently, she got a hall pass herself to leave her own community college teaching job to tour our nation. But what Local 4 is learning is that this was really just part of the public show. Indeed, a lot of the work is being done behind the scenes, away from the cameras.
Community colleges are founded on the idea that no matter where we are, no matter where we come from, or what struggles we faced, all of us have the potential to grow and learn.
While the branding on the bus said return to school, what was on her mind was multifold, pushing the 2 years of free education Biden agenda, shoring up safety for children to get back to school safely, and also touting the millions of dollars the Biden administration has gotten directly into local schools.
How we look at the inequities that have plagued our country for generations. We owe it to ourselves to build back better than before.
Traveling with the First Lady, Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, the backstory here is that this week, Cardona's deputies have been doing face-to-face meetings with educators from Southfield to Plymouth Canton to Traverse City since last night.
Last evening, representatives of the White House COVID task force were engaged in a conversation with 15 parents representing Southfield Public Schools and our surrounding communities. The conversation involved their experiences throughout the pandemic when we went virtual, as well as what they would like to see from their federal government as we move forward.
Indeed, the big show was at OCC today, and the attention a First Lady brings with her. But according to educators who've been talking to me since last week, the real work is being done far from the camera's eye in small groups across the state with big ears in the room. Yeah, I want to talk a little more about what's also been on that agenda behind the scenes. And we're talking about equalization payments to underserved school districts and also more utilization of those ESSER funds that pumped a boatload of money into individual school districts earlier this year. And also how to close the gap with special education. So a lot of work. And guys, I got to tell you, I heard about the First Lady's visit early last week before it was even announced. Educators were really excited about being able to roll up their sleeves and get to work literally with the White House staff in front of them.
A very important visit, obviously, here locally. Thank you, Paula.
All right, so that was really exciting, and I'm glad this worked. So give us some feedback. Let us know if you were able to see and hear the video. If you couldn't, I see a comment that it was a very proud moment for our Royal Oak High School drumline who participated. That's who you saw in the video. I had the opportunity to attend the event as well and meet the Secretary of Education and the First Lady and welcome them to Royal Oak. So it was a really great moment to highlight OCC, Oakland Community College, and this really was the anchor stop on the return to school education tour, which is a big moment for us and a really proud thing for our community.
First Lady Jill Biden making a
Oh no, let's get to the next slide. All right, doubling up on playing. We're working through it. So this week, we're jumping to updates from the Capitol. I, along with a few of my colleagues, introduced a legislative package focusing on aiding and assisting women in the workforce. This is a huge issue, especially as we are hopefully coming out on the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen throughout the past 18 months that women have now lost decades of gains in the workforce. So many women are staying home, have left the workforce, are not able to return to the workforce. And that's something we've heard loud and clear. These are issues that have existed for a long time, but the COVID-19 pandemic really laid bare the vulnerabilities that exist for women in the workforce. So along with many of my colleagues in the Progressive Women's Caucus, we introduced a package of bills to support women in families and really try to address the labor shortage as well. You know, we heard testimony in the Senate Economic Development Committee a couple of weeks ago from the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, highlighting the continued challenges that they have of staffing, of bringing people back to work. I know a lot of people tended to blame the federal unemployment $300 extension, but that expired a few weeks ago. And what we heard from the association, I think unsurprisingly to some of us who have been reading a lot of the research, that hasn't brought people back to work, right? So even though the federal unemployment extension expired, there are still challenges, people afraid for safety. What we heard from the Restaurant and Lodging Association was treatment of workers. A lot of people who love this industry are just being treated abysmally by customers, working extra long hours. But a huge part of that challenge is for women in the workforce. So one of my bills in the package, very simply, and this was an idea from a constituent who reached out to us after hearing about my own experience giving birth to Noah, my daughter, back in January, and my experience with leave and kind of struggling to find the work-life balance of being a new mom and returning to work, she reached out to us and said, hey, something that would help very simply would be to require that employers disclose their family leave policy up front. So our bill very simply does that. It requires that all employers disclose their family leave policy to all current and prospective employees. And what we've heard is a lot of people, even in the interviewing process, are afraid to ask about family leave policy, particularly women, for fear that it may disqualify them or cause their employer, their hiring manager, to think twice about hiring them for fear that that employee may get pregnant and take a leave. So this would eliminate discrimination in hiring and empower families and women to make informed decisions about their careers, knowing what that family leave policy is up front. All right. Another bill that we discussed this week up in the Senate Economic Development Committee was Senate Bill 615. This is a new version of Good Jobs for Michigan, which was an economic development program that expired in 2019. The way that program functioned was it allowed awarded companies, so big corporations, to capture and retain employees' income taxes for themselves if they created so-called good jobs. There's been a lot of criticism of programs like this, kind of top-down corporate tax incentives, not only just sort of the fundamentals, but their effectiveness. So I've talked a lot about research that the Upjohn Institute, which is based in Kalamazoo, has done regarding these programs. There was a book that came out a couple of years ago regarding these incentives, just showing, they really don't necessarily move the needle on where companies decide to locate. And what I've been advocating for since taking office is more holistic economic development here in the state of Michigan. So we know that companies locate where the talent is, and that is oftentimes much more valuable than maybe a tax break or a corporate tax incentive or cash that a state may put up. So that's something I'm continuing to push for. We will continue to have conversations there. But my stance is I am not fundamentally opposed to economic development, but we need to do it in a way that supports residents. That doesn't just assume that if we attract a company here, that is going to necessarily be good for residents, especially if it costs us taxpayer money. So a good example of that I highlighted in op-ed from a few years ago was our experience with Amazon HQ2. The state of Michigan put up a $4 billion tax incentive, but the area that ended up kind of winning that headquarters was Northern Virginia. And they did that with a much more moderate tax incentive. There was still some money on the table, but they also created a new campus of Virginia Tech in Northern Virginia and improved transit and infrastructure in that area too. So in my mind, that's a win-win for everybody, because even if Amazon up and leaves eventually, you've got that investment in the local community that's going to leave residents in a stronger place than they were before. So we will keep everybody posted on movement on those bills. Up next, we had a number of election bills that came to the floor of the Senate this week that were part of the Michigan Republicans' 39 bill package to supposedly tighten up our elections. I'm going to play the video of my floor speech related to this and then talk a little bit more about it, because we know that a number of people are concerned about these bills and others. As my colleague just mentioned, this very body conducted months of hearings and testimony and took questions about all of the concerns about the 2020 election, including that these machines were hooked up to the internet, and found no evidence to support those claims. And when you first see these bills put up in front of us, you think that they must be innocuous, because if something already doesn't exist, then sure, why wouldn't we pass a bill to prohibit that? However, we know that if we do that, if we vote in favor of a bill to ban something that already does not exist, it validates that lie's existence. That's what is happening here. So even though this body published a comprehensive report detailing that there was no fraud in the 2020 election and that this claim was not true. Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow, conducted a cybersecurity symposium, invited people, had screenshots of code that he proved that computers in China were able to change votes of 10 counties throughout the country. And guess what? One of the counties that he claimed had votes changed was Oakland County, Michigan. So you can imagine how stressful it was when my staff, who has been working tirelessly for the past 18 months to help people get unemployment, to help people find food banks, to help people navigate this pandemic and come out of it stronger, were once again bombarded with threats and emails and phone calls and social media posts threatening us to do the right thing, to follow election security expert Mike Lindell, because he went on national news and pointed out Oakland County, Michigan, as where these supposed fraudulent actions took place. So I encourage everybody here to vote no, because we should not be passing bills in this chamber for things that already do not exist, because all that does is perpetuate and validate a lie that is dangerous. Thank you. So that was a little more fiery than I usually am in these coffee hours, but what's been happening, and to kind of explain the process. So there are 39 bills in the package. And for those who have been following or not following along, so the 2020 election is still the cause of groups claiming that there was rampant fraud, that somehow the election was stolen, that votes were changed, that there was something amiss with these elections. And the Senate Oversight Committee, which only has one Democrat on it, so the committee is a majority Republican committee, took months and months and months of testimony and hearings reviewing all of these claims, from voting tabulators being connected to the internet, to dead people voting, to backup ballots being brought in the middle of the night, all of these claims, and debunked them and published a comprehensive report that they put out that went claim by claim by claim and said that overwhelmingly there is no evidence that exists to support any of these claims, that the 2020 election was secure and that the results were accurate. Now, despite this report, my GOP colleagues put together this election bill package to supposedly tighten up and secure our elections. And right away, I mean, that is something that is disingenuous to me, because it is really trying to have it both ways. You cannot, on one hand, say, yes, our elections were secure, our election workers did a fantastic job, and invalidate all these claims, and then simultaneously put up legislation that on its face, when we introduce bills, it's to fix a problem. So that assumes in and of itself that you're introducing legislation to solve a problem. We know that many of the bills in this package are direct copies of bills from other states. Many of them were written by the Heritage Foundation and given to legislators across the country. So a few of the bills that came to the floor this week were rushed through. They weren't on our agenda. And on their face, they seem pretty harmless. Like the bill that I spoke out about in that video would be a bill to prohibit voting tabulators from being connected to the internet, which is all well and good, except for the fact that none of our voting machines are connected to the internet. And beyond that, Michigan has paper ballots. So we do not have a computer that you go in and vote on by clicking on a screen or hitting a button. You fill out a paper ballot. You run that ballot through a tabulator. That tabulator is not connected to the internet. But beyond that, we have a physical hard copy of all of the ballots. And there have been more than 250 audits done on the 2020 election that shows that everything is validated. So I voted against this bill for that exact reason, because when you put up legislation and you pass legislation, it validates the premise of that legislation. So you can't say on one hand, this didn't happen, but we're going to pass legislation to support it anyway. So some of these bills on their face seem kind of harmless, but fundamentally, it's just trying to chip away and continue to sow doubt in our election process. I have clerks throughout my district and have had clerks throughout my district who are both Republican and Democratic. We've had them on here. We've done live town halls together. And one of the hardest things about this is this continued push to sow doubt in the process has led many of our public servants, people who've committed their careers and lives just to running elections and running them securely, have left, have quit, and moved on. And there are attacks and threats against election workers. So I will continue to stand out and speak against these bills. But, I think as you, as residents, are hearing about some of these things in your head, you might hear, oh, that makes sense on its face. I would just ask that if you have any questions, reach out. We are happy to bring election security experts. We are happy to provide that access and answer any questions that you have about anything. But my recommendation for anybody who has doubts about the process is volunteer. Sign up to be a poll worker, sign up to work an election, be a part of the process. There is training. You can see how all of these systems work, and all of the checks and balances that exist in our state. And be a part of the solution, because our clerks are always looking for additional poll workers. And everybody who I've talked to who's been a poll worker just says it feels so good to be a part of the process and to help facilitate an election. So that's it on that. And I will move on to plenty of other news that we have this week. This is running long because I've added in videos, but we'll get to it and then get to Q&As for the people who are here. So one bill that was good that moved through the Senate this week is legislation to prohibit Medicaid health plans from subjecting certain drugs, for example, those to treat HIV, epilepsy, cancer, mental health, or substance abuse, and others, to prior authorization. So what happens oftentimes is people receive a prescription for medication to treat epilepsy, cancer, a mental health issue, and then their insurance company holds that up and goes through the process of prior authorization. And sometimes insurance companies reject the prescription that your doctor has written. So this is a good step forward to making sure that that middle action is taken out. We know how frustrating and frankly dangerous that is for people who can't get the prescriptions that their doctors have prescribed. So that moved on a broadly bipartisan basis. And that was something good. We always like to share not just the controversial things, but the good things that happen in the legislature. Segment transition, moving on to updates from the district. We have heard reports and constituents have reached out regarding a fatality in Birmingham. So a few weeks ago, there was a woman crossing an intersection of Woodward in Birmingham who was struck by a car and died. Now, news reports looking into this did say that this woman, who was 39 years old, was crossing against the signal. So she was in the intersection when the signal said not to cross. She was struck by a young, I think she was a 24-year-old woman, and unfortunately died. The driver immediately stopped, cooperated with authorities. It's a tragedy. But what this has brought to light is this is not the first incident of pedestrian danger on Woodward. Woodward Avenue is, unique in that it's a state highway that goes through multiple of our communities from Detroit up to Pontiac, but touches, Royal Oak, Berkeley, Birmingham, and Bloomfield Hills, and is kind of a joint effort between a state highway that is overseen for maintenance by the county, but also has input from municipalities. We see each of our municipalities set up, their development around Woodward very, very differently. So we've heard concern from residents and the Birmingham City Council about this, and reached out to MDOT and wanted to report back what has been done so far. So MDOT met internally to discuss possible solutions to improve pedestrian safety. They collected pedestrian counts for the Woodward at Forest/Brown crosswalk for 2 days. So on September 8th from 4 to 5 p.m., 17 pedestrians crossed, 3 were elderly, and were included in counts as 2 pedestrians. And on September 9th from 8 to 9 a.m., 9 pedestrians crossed that intersection. They had an on-site meeting with Birmingham city manager and city officials. regarding the pedestrian crossing. And during the field visit, the team observed pedestrian activity, reviewed intersection geometry, and identified a few immediate action steps for both the city of Birmingham and MDOT to take. We have more notes on actions that are being taken, but kind of next steps are the city is going to investigate, and this is action steps for the city that was identified by this visit with MDOT. The city will investigate removing overgrown tree branches to improve sight distance across that intersection. The city will investigate installing and changing overhead street lights. The city will provide MDOT with a list of upcoming special events so that MDOT can observe them and conduct a pedestrian count study when there's more activity in that area. And the city will also provide input regarding pedestrian activity to the south of Forest Avenue, such as pedestrians crossing near Speedway or transit stops. So this is ongoing. We will continue our communication with the city of Birmingham and with MDOT and keep everybody advised. Additional news from the district and an update that we are able to provide. You heard about this in our budget news last week. We were able to secure $300,000 for an I75 sound study. So this impacts an area of Troy where MDOT had conducted a sound study prior to the new construction of I75. Those initial studies showed that certain areas of Troy did not qualify for a sound wall based on federal guidelines. But following the construction, many residents have been reporting for years, frankly, to the city, to us, to reporters, that the elevation of sound is really diminishing the quality of life and that it has become almost unbearable. So we confirmed with MDOT that those studies were conducted prior to construction, not after construction. But, we went back and said, is there an ability to do a sound study? They told us we just don't have the funds. To put this in context, and I shared this with the city council last week, Michigan spends less per capita on infrastructure than any other state in the Midwest. So if we were to ask MDOT to fund another study, that would inevitably pull funding from other road repair projects. And we have roads in disrepair, we have bridges in disrepair. There's a lot we need to do to fix the damn roads. So knowing that, we pursued a solution through the budget and were able to secure additional funds for this study specifically. So the governor signed the budget, which is great news. And we will continue to report back on next steps with MDOT regarding timing and next steps. But this is huge. I know, and I mentioned this to Troy when I was there with Rep. Koopa last week. We know this is not a sound wall. This is a study, but that is progress. And, just a huge testimony and thanks to everybody who has continued to advocate for the community with us and working together, and is a big win when sometimes it doesn't feel like we get big wins. So we will keep everybody posted. And with that, we will move along into, that's kind of good news, but we're going to move into good news from the neighborhood and our community. First up is a young entrepreneur who is very creatively trying to make the world a better place. Ida Morrow, no relationship to me, Mallory McMorrow, is a 5-year-old from Royal Oak who sold painted rocks and other trinkets to raise money and buy socks for homeless people. Rocks for socks. Awesome. Super cute. Thank you, Ida, for helping make the world a better place and helping our homeless residents get socks, which is so important as we're going into fall and winter weather. Next up, this story is unbearably cute. Sorry for the puns. Okay. At the Detroit Zoo, so there is a grizzly bear cub who was orphaned, Jebby, who recently found a new home at the Detroit Zoo after he was found wandering alone in Tok, Alaska by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. After a thorough health assessment, Jebby was transferred here to Michigan to the Detroit Zoo, where he met an unlikely friend, Lerky, a polar bear cub born at the facility last year. And there was a kind of a really sad backstory. So our polar bear cub was born, which is great news. But then the polar bear cub's mom had health issues and had to go away for a while for health experts to monitor and work on the mom. But when they were returned, they were reunited. The polar bear mom actually did not recognize her cub, which was really sad. So the zoo was committed to finding the cub a friend, a companion, and this worked out really, really well. And I think we have a video on that as well. I know this is running long, but you got to end the weekend with some really, really cute bear action.
Well, a new friendship has formed over at the
This is
Detroit Zoo. It's capturing hearts all around the country.
I love this. If you were with us yesterday, you already saw a little bit of this. We showed you the zoo's new grizzly bear cub, Jebby, playing with his new buddy, polar bear cub, Laorki. Grant Herms tells us why this special bond is so important for both bears.
The Detroit Zoo's newest playmates having a swim in the midday sun. Playful polar bear cub Laorca was born here at the zoo, but after needing emergency care, mom wouldn't take her back. And life on your own is no way to live as a rambunctious cub.
It's really important for bears, like many animals, to not grow up alone.
But there was one problem. No one in the country had a polar bear cub who could come over and play. So they had to look for someone a bit unusual.
And it didn't take very long for Alaska to contact us and say they had a cub that had been found wandering by himself.
He is Jebby, a grizzly bear cub orphaned by his mom. After a few long flights, several weeks of introductions, and highly supervised play dates,
They both had to learn how to interact with another bear, which took them a little bit of time. Like all bear cubs, they play kind of rough, and they're both okay with that.
Laorca and her new best friend with the deep tan got to make their debut to the entire zoo together.
She spends a lot of time in the pool. She loves the pool. And he typically likes the pool too, but all day today, she can't get him to join her in the pool. She's been trying all morning.
While Jebby and Laorca may be cute, their story is one that we might see more of in the wild. As the world gets hotter because of climate change, grizzly bears are being forced north to forage food where places they wouldn't be normally, and polar bears are being forced south. So we could see more friendships like this potentially in the wild in the years to come.
We are seeing more reports of polar bears and grizzly bears coming together. There have been a few reports of them breeding with each other in the wild.
Life on their own in a changing world, neither would likely have survived. These two cubs proving life without a little help from a friend would be unbearable. In Detroit, Grant Herms, Local 4.
Well, a new
It is hard to do that without puns. I also want to share, I had to share this screenshot too, because this story has gone viral all over the place. And these are probably two of our celebrity. I tried to make a horrible pun. That didn't work. So these bears have gone wild. It was in People magazine. It was on CNN. It's all over the country. It's a cool story, but really kind of my gratitude to our local newscast for kind of highlighting the challenges in this, that this may become much more likely with climate change, as our changing climate is pushing wildlife out of their natural habitat. So something we're going to have to keep an eye on. And the Detroit Zoo, for those who may not know, has actually grown a reputation over the past few decades as becoming one of the world's most renowned conservation organizations, where, whether it's rehabilitating animals who are on the endangered species list, or, creating kind of partnerships like this. And has become a place where researchers and scientists are really studying and understanding the impacts of climate change on our wildlife. Next up in our good news, 2 Troy schools have been selected as U.S. Blue Ribbon Schools. Several Michigan schools were honored as Blue Ribbon Schools by the U.S. Department of Education on Tuesday, including 2 in Troy. The award recognizes a school's overall academic performance, as well as the commitment by the staff to help students succeed. And those are Barnard Elementary and Leonard Elementary. Congratulations. And we can't wait to see, as always, what the students who come out of these amazing schools in our district go on to do. And then finally, before we get into Q&A, I wanted to shout out an event this weekend for people who are in town. It is Berkeley Restaurant Weekend. There are going to be 9 local restaurants who are offering specials on food and drink. The weather has been amazing all week. I think it's going to be amazing this weekend. It's part of Berkeley Nights. There are a lot of puns happening this week. Get out, support our local restaurants and bars, and head out to Berkeley. It should be a good time. So that is wrapping up our news. We are going to open it up to Q&A. So as always, I'm going to bring on Liz, our Director of Constituent Services and District Outreach, who put her title in her name so I can see it and don't screw it up this week.
What a fun time for the Berkeley Restaurant Weekend. I love Berkeley Common. I go there often with my friend. She lives in Royal Oak, and we love it.
Oh, great.
All right, first question we have from Amy in Royal Oak from our Submit Your Question form. Wants to know more about the full practice scope authority for nurse practitioners in Michigan. If you have a stance on it, or if you have any questions or concerns regarding this topic.
For sure. Yeah, this is an issue that comes up all the time, every year, every term, regarding scope of practice. So there's always legislation to explore various scopes of practice. This falls under LARA, the Licensing and Regulatory Authority, in terms of, as you might imagine, what the scope of practice is for, a doctor, a nurse practitioner. And there's always kind of the push and pull of who's in each other's space and what can we do to make sure, from my point of view, I am always looking for ways that we can safely and securely expand access to healthcare. We know that healthcare costs are astronomical. We know that oftentimes trying to get a doctor's appointment is incredibly challenging. So while I haven't seen the bill language for this year's yet, we'll absolutely take a look at it. And then our process, especially on issues like these that are sensitive and have a lot of stakeholder involvement, is checking in with residents throughout our district, checking in with all of the various stakeholders, hearing all sides, and then moving forward. I know with anything scope of practice, it always has a tough time in the legislature. These are issues that tend to come up kind of term after term after term. We have seen some movement in some other areas over the past few years on expanding scope of practice to expand that patient care. So we'll be on the lookout for this. But if you are a resident who has experience with this and you want to share your view, please always do. I mean, this is something where we want to hear from residents and stakeholders as we consider any legislation. So we can also follow up. And if you want to sign up for our email newsletter, and if you're interested in this bill in particular, we can let you know who has the bill, when it was introduced, and kind of its status, if it's been introduced to a committee, if it has a committee hearing scheduled, and all of that.
Yeah, and we have the ability to look up the previous legislation where that had gone through the process as well. All right, next question. Ryan on Facebook wants to know if there's any update on Danny Fenster.
This is so heartbreaking. So for anybody who doesn't know, Danny Fenster is a journalist from our area who is a Berkeley and Huntington Woods native, went to Berkeley schools. His family lives in Huntington Woods, who had moved to Myanmar and was a journalist in Myanmar who was arrested, detained with no crime, not charged with any crime, over 100 days ago now. And there has been a lot of government unrest in Myanmar. There were kind of some images that went viral worldwide of kind of a coup happening in real time. And that creates a very tenuous situation. So we continue to be in touch with Senator Gary Peters' office, Senator Andy Levin's office, who are continuing to work on this. There's, some level of separation. When we are working with federal offices, there's certain information they can and cannot share with us on the state level. But we are checking in regularly. And I do encourage anybody, and this was an ask that we have received from the federal offices, to spread the word about this. So Ryan, I know you've been using the hashtag Bring Danny Home. I've been sharing kind of updates as I see them on my Twitter account, which happens to have the most followers. So that's something that we have heard is that matters, because then it is something that could potentially give the U.S. State Department, some leverage to say this is something that is important to Americans as the State Department is hopefully negotiating to bring him home.
Yeah, and that's the only questions that we have currently. There's a couple of comments in there. Bill from YouTube, who I think might be our only YouTube person. I've never seen a person outside of him comment from YouTube.
Thanks for holding it down, Bill. We're going to get more people.
Thanks, Bill. Talking about the tree limbs being trimmed in Clawson with power outages. I know our office has worked a lot with that, especially in the Clawson, and working with local businesses there too.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it is an ongoing challenge. We are going to continue to keep people posted about how we move forward to ensure that we have grid reliability in the face of continued extreme weather. So this will be something that is ongoing. I've had many meetings with DTE. I serve on the Energy and Technology Committee, and are working with my colleagues on a climate resiliency bill package to make sure that we are better prepared. But some movement that I've seen, tree trimming is a piece of it, and staying on top of it and making sure, those tree limbs around lines are trimmed. So Bill, good reporting back. I'm glad to hear that is happening in Clawson. And we'll make sure to pass that along to the city and to DTE to say, keep up the good work and keep going. But beyond that, we have to have a broader conversation about, does it make sense to bury the lines in certain places? Are there microgrids we can create? Can we increase residential solar and have kind of backup? So more to come, but glad to hear that you have seen tree trimming in Clawson, which is good news, Bill.
Good news. All right. And that's all the questions that we have. Just wanted to do a quick shout out to that comment. But yeah.
Cool. Well, Liz, plans for the weekend?
My weekend? I'm in a wedding this weekend for my friends Rachel and Neil. So they're getting married in the market in Grand Rapids. It's like a beautiful greenhouse. So really looking forward to being a part of their day.
Yeah, this feels like, we're hitting that point where the weather is amazing. This is like my favorite time of the year in Michigan. But it also means that winter is coming. So I am pro get outside every opportunity you have before it goes to winter.
Yeah, I can't think about winters coming without thinking of Game of Thrones. So,
all right. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend. I hope you stay safe. I hope you get outside, and we will see you next time for another live stream with Mallory. If you have a clever name for this that we could do, let us know. We're always taking feedback. And if you like these, please share them with your friends or neighbors. We try to make this not prohibitively political and wonky. We want this to be something that people enjoy and feel like it's a good way to keep up with what's going on. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.